The night began like any other on the Crimson Peak set. The studio lot was quiet, the kind of silence that stretches too long and feels unnatural. Stage lights flickered faintly, casting jagged shadows across unfinished sets meant to simulate the haunted mansion at the heart of the film. Crew members whispered nervously about small, unexplained occurrences. A prop moving just enough to notice, cameras failing without reason, or distant murmurs that no one could place. It was just after midnight when the first call came in, an emergency 911 report that would send chills across Hollywood. A young grip, only a week on the set, had vanished while retrieving equipment from the soundstage. There were no signs of struggle, no traces left behind. The security cameras showed nothing. The last footage captured him stepping into the hallway, then nothing. His bag lay neatly by the wall, tools inside untouched, shoes in place. As if he had simply evaporated, the production team was stunned. Some dismissed it as a prank or an overactive imagination, but the unease was palpable. Crew members began double-checking each other, doors were locked when not in use, and whispers about the land's history began circulating, stories of tragedies that had occurred decades before, tied to the very plot the studio had purchased for filming. The area had been the site of old estates, rumored disappearances, and shadows of past misfortune. Those who had lived nearby warned that filming there had never been safe. Despite the growing dread, the studio insisted production continue. Delays could cost millions, and Hollywood tolerated little in the way of superstition. But for those on the set, the air had changed. Lights flickered more aggressively. Props would shift positions overnight. Distant screams were heard when the cameras were off. Some crew swore they had glimpsed figures at the edge of their vision, humanoid shapes that vanished when directly looked at, leaving only a faint chill in their wake. Within a week, the second disappearance occurred. A costume designer, known for her meticulous attention to detail, went to check on a wardrobe room left locked overnight. When she didn't return, a search was mounted immediately. Again, nothing. Doors were locked from the inside, windows untouched. The smell of perfume lingered briefly, then nothing. Panic began to ripple through the crew. Fear replaced skepticism. Whispers became louder, conversations sharper, eyes darting constantly to every shadow. The lore surrounding the land gained weight. Locals spoke of previous estates abandoned under mysterious circumstances, stories of servants and workers vanishing without explanation. There were rumors of a curse, a restless presence that fed on fear and curiosity alike. The line between fiction and reality blurred for the cast and crew. Some suggested halting production entirely, while others, pressed by contracts and schedules, tried to rationalize the events. Even as investigators were called in, they found no clues. The studio kept the press at bay, but rumors spread like wildfire. Social media posts, anonymous messages, and leaked internal reports fueled a frenzy of speculation. People debated whether it was a cover-up, a mass hallucination, or something supernatural. Paranormal experts were contacted. Skeptics scoffed. Yet the evidence or lack thereof was frustratingly uniform. Those who disappeared left no trace, no digital footprint, nothing to suggest how or why. By the third week, anxiety had reached a fever pitch. Crew members spoke of doors opening on their own, of whispers following them in empty halls. Some claimed to hear laughter in the distance when no one else was there. The atmosphere on set became oppressive, and each passing day made it harder to distinguish routine accidents from something far more sinister. The disappearances were no longer isolated, they were a pattern, a dark rhythm marking the Crimson Peak production as something cursed, a story no one wanted to admit but everyone felt. And then, on a night thick with fog, the remaining crew huddled near the main stage, daring to speak aloud the fear they all shared. One technician whispered a question that hung in the cold air, heavy and terrifying. If this set is taking them, who will be next? The morning after the first disappearances, the set of Crimson Peak felt like a different world. The usual hum of activity was replaced by a tense, uneasy silence. Crew members moved cautiously, glancing over their shoulders, hesitant to speak too loudly. The whispers of vanished colleagues hung in the air like a thick fog, seeping into every corner of the sprawling lot. No one wanted to be alone, yet no one dared challenge the schedule or the studio's insistence to continue filming. By midday, the second incident had been reported in hushed tones among the crew. The costume designer had simply vanished while inspecting the wardrobe room, leaving behind her meticulously organized racks and the faint scent of her perfume. Investigators had been called, cameras reviewed, every inch of the studio scoured, but there was nothing. No footprints, no forced entry, no explanation. Those who had witnessed the moments before the disappearances described nothing out of the blue. Ordinary, and yet the pattern was undeniable. People were vanishing, one by one. In spaces that should have been entirely controlled, rumors began to circulate about the history of the property. Locals spoke of a string of inexplicable events on the land. Employees disappearing from estates, houses abandoned in haste, whispers of restless spirits. The studio dismissed such talk as superstition, but the crew couldn't shake the feeling that the land itself was alive, watching, and claiming those who dared to intrude. Some crew members began leaving small offerings at the edges of the set, coins, trinkets, scraps of paper with prayers, desperate to appease whatever force they sensed. As days turned into nights, the pattern grew more sinister. Lights flickered. At odd times, cameras failed mid-scene without technical cause, and objects moved when no one was looking. Crew members reported feeling cold hands brushing their skin, distant laughter echoing through empty corridors, and shadows slipping along walls despite no source of light. The tension became almost unbearable as fear gnawed at even the most skeptical. One evening, a grip vanished near the backlot during a scheduled equipment check. Colleagues described seeing him walking toward the storage area, then stopping mid-step, as if startled by something unseen. Moments later, he was gone. Only the faint hum of equipment remained. Panic gripped the surviving crew. People were no longer talking quietly, they were openly demanding answers, their voices trembling with a mixture of disbelief and terror. Eyewitness accounts began to accumulate. A lighting technician swore he had seen figures standing in the fog, their faces obscured, their movements deliberate yet impossible. Another crew member claimed that during a night shoot, a shadow detached itself from the set walls, moving independently and vanishing through solid doors. Even those who tried to rationalize the events admitted to a gnawing unease that could not be explained by logical means. Meanwhile, studio executives pressured the director and production team to continue. The budget was ballooning, contracts had been signed, and publicity had already promised a blockbuster release. But the remaining crew were on edge, afraid to work, afraid to sleep, afraid of being alone. Arguments broke out, tensions escalated, and yet filming pressed on under a cloud of palpable dread. Amidst the chaos, a few brave souls began documenting everything. Notebooks filled with observations of lights flickering, doors opening, and distant, incomprehensible sounds. Patterns began to emerge. Most disappearances occurred near certain sections of the set, often areas that replicated the darker interiors of the film's story. Crew members noted a strange correlation between set design elements and the incidents, hinting that the set itself might be amplifying or channeling something far beyond human understanding. As night fell, the tension peaked. Those who remained were reluctant to return to their tents or trailers. Whispers of the curse began circulating openly. One assistant director confessed in a trembling voice, "It's not the movie. It's the land. It's watching us." The wind carried faint, eerie murmurs, almost like voices calling names, weaving through the scaffolding and fog. Every rustle of leaves, every flicker of light, made hearts pound faster. And then, as the clock neared midnight, another disappearance. Occurred this time a key grip, one of the most experienced crew members. His vanishing was sudden and complete, witnessed by two colleagues who froze in shock, unable to move. The studio cameras recorded nothing. The area was empty when investigators arrived. A chill settled across the lot. The remaining crew huddled together, eyes wide, realizing the truth that could no longer be ignored. The set was dangerous in ways no one could rationalize, and the curse or whatever force haunted the land was far from finished. One final whispered warning reached the ears of those who survived the night. Leave, before it chooses you. The remaining crew on the Crimson Peak set were unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. Fear had become a tangible presence, suffocating in its weight, pressing down on every set piece, every darkened hallway, every corner of the sprawling lot. By now, the disappearances were no longer isolated incidents, they were a pattern, a series of events that defied logic and reason, leaving those still present teetering on the edge of panic. Investigators had been called in, but every forensic effort hit a dead end. Security footage showed gaps, glitches, or complete blanks in the exact moments people vanished. Searches turned up nothing, no signs of forced entry, no footprints, no physical evidence of struggle. The authorities were baffled, yet the studio insisted on keeping filming on schedule, citing contracts, budget pressures, and the impossibility of admitting to an active crisis. For the crew, this insistence was a death sentence masked as business as usual. Eyewitness accounts multiplied. A camera operator reported seeing a shadow detach itself from a wall, gliding silently across the soundstage before dissolving into the floor. A makeup artist swore she felt someone brush past her in the hall, only to find no one there. Whispers followed them in corridors, faint at first, growing louder, like a choir of names called in the wrong tone. Panic was contagious. Suspicion spread like wildfire. Some began accusing each other of pranks or even sabotage, while others refused to leave their stations. Convinced that movement would attract the unseen force, rumors began to coalesce around the land itself. Locals spoke of the area's history, of estates abandoned under mysterious circumstances, of people vanishing without trace over decades. The studio tried to dismiss these as superstitions, but crew members couldn't ignore the unsettling coincidences. Some theorized that the set, built over the site of old foundations and overgrown graves, had become a conduit for something malevolent, a trap that preyed on those who tread too close to its heart. By the fourth week, production had devolved into chaos. Lights flickered uncontrollably, sound equipment picked up impossible noises, and props moved of their own accord. During one night shoot, a stagehand vanished before the eyes of 5 colleagues. They had watched him step behind a partition, then nothing, no scream, no sound, no trace. The only evidence was the cold wind that seemed to rush past, carrying faint, unintelligible whispers. Several crew members attempted to leave the set altogether, but the roads and parking areas were eerily empty, as if the surrounding world had disappeared along with those taken. A few reported seeing figures in the fog, faces obscured, motionless yet observing. One frightened assistant tried to call home, only for the phone to emit static and whispers in languages he didn't recognize. The force behind these vanishings was no longer subtle. It was aware, reactive, almost intelligent. Meanwhile, the Studio hired paranormal consultants, skeptics, and even psychologists to explain the events. Theories ranged from mass hysteria and hallucination to secret sabotage to deliberate publicity stunts. But no hypothesis accounted for the patterns, the physical impossibilities, or the growing terror etched on the faces of those who remained. The consultants themselves began leaving cryptic statements, refusing to stay overnight, citing unexplainable sensations and a presence that watches and waits. By now, fear had infiltrated every conversation. Crew members would exchange terrified glances instead of words. Equipment operators refused to enter certain stages. Actors spoke in whispers, rehearsing lines that no longer seemed safe. Even the director, once authoritative, was visibly trembling, haunted by the knowledge that the set itself had become a predator. Then, in a moment that would be etched into the minds of all survivors, an entire scene collapsed. Stage lights fell. Without warning, scaffolding shook and a fog rolled in from nowhere, enveloping everything in thick, suffocating mist. Shadows moved in ways that defied physics, stretching across walls, splitting, and merging. From the mist came a faint chorus of voices calling names of the missing. Those left watched helplessly, paralyzed by terror. And then, a final, unmistakable sign. A figure emerged briefly, humanoid, featureless, before vanishing entirely. It was a message, clear and chilling. The curse or whatever force haunted the set was still active, deliberate, and patient. By the end of the week, the production was in ruins. Equipment lay scattered, the set abandoned, and the surviving crew clung together, each haunted by what they had seen, each questioning whether their senses could even be trusted. The vanishings had left physical marks, but more enduring were the psychological scars. Nightmares, hypervigilance, and an unshakable fear that the land, or the set, still remembered them. One assistant whispered to the group, his voice shaking, "They're not done. They're waiting. And they're not just taking people. They're teaching us something. Something we weren't supposed to learn." The surviving crew left the lot in silence, glancing constantly over their shoulders, the fog swallowing their footsteps. The Crimson Peak production was over, not canceled, not delayed, but effectively erased, leaving behind only whispered rumors, missing people, and a question that no one could answer. Had the curse of the set claimed only those taken, or was it still lingering, waiting for the next production brave or foolish enough to return? The final days on the Crimson Peak set were a nightmare that no one could have imagined. The remaining crew moved like shadows themselves, their footsteps hesitant, voices hushed. Equipment lay abandoned, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and damp wood, a scent that seemed to cling to the skin of anyone who dared remain. No one slept well. Dreams were filled with shadows stretching impossibly long, whispers calling names in languages they couldn't recognize, and fleeting glimpses of missing colleagues standing just beyond their vision. As daylight broke over the fog-shrouded lot, the surviving crew gathered near the main sound stage. They were terrified, exhausted, and desperate for answers. The studio, realizing the production was effectively paralyzed, finally granted them time to leave. But even as they packed their belongings, the unease remained. Lights flickered in irregular patterns, props shifted on their own, and a cold draft swept across the empty corridors, carrying faint, taunting laughter. Desperate to understand, a small group of crew members and consultants decided to investigate the set itself. They examined the areas where vanishings had occurred, noting patterns. Each disappearance had taken place near certain props, set pieces, or lighting rigs. They cross-referenced these with reports of shadows and whispers, discovering a chilling correlation. The more detailed and authentic the set became designed to immerse actors in horror, the stronger the presence seemed to grow. Late in the afternoon, one of the consultants suggested they conduct a simple test. move a prop from one area to another, and observe. A chair from the first stage was lifted and carried to the main hallway. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in the corner of a hallway, a shadow coalesced, moving unnaturally toward the chair. It paused, hesitated, then seemed to dissolve, leaving a chill in its wake. Even the skeptics were shaken. The set was more than a location, it was a conduit. A focal point, perhaps even sentient in a way that defied understanding. By evening, the group had pieced together a theory, chilling in its implications. The disappearances were not random. The set, combined with the land's history, had created a nexus of energy that preyed on attention, presence, and perhaps fear itself. Those who vanished had become absorbed into the space, leaving nothing behind but the sensation of absence and the lingering psychological imprint on survivors. The set had been hungry, feeding on those who interacted with it, or more precisely, on those who immersed themselves fully in its illusion. A final inspection led the team to the main stage, the heart of the set, where the original Vanishings had occurred. Here, they found the faint outlines of figures, almost transparent, etched into dust on the floor, and scattered notes from the production crew warning to leave now or don't go near the lights. As night fell, the air grew colder, and an unnatural fog began creeping along the floorboards. Figures flickered in and out of the mist, distant voices murmuring names. At that moment, a sound echoed through the empty soundstage, a slow, deliberate whisper, unmistakably human, yet distorted. Return. Only if you dare. The surviving crew left immediately, never looking back. Cameras, props, and set pieces were abandoned, the lot sealed off. Officially, the Crimson Peak production was canceled due to budget and logistical issues, but rumors persisted. Actors and crew who had survived were forever marked by the experience. Some refused to work on film again, others relocated, haunted by fleeting shadows in their homes or whispers in the dark. Psychologists consulted by the studio noted trauma, hypervigilance, and lasting fear, yet none could fully explain the phenomenon. Over time, urban legends grew around the set. Social media posts and leaked anecdotes suggested the disappearances were real. Paranormal enthusiasts claimed to detect energy spikes near the abandoned lot. Filmmakers whispered that the property was cursed, a place where ambition and reality collided with something far older, more patient, and far more dangerous than any studio could control. The Crimson Peak set, now deserted, stands as a testament to the unknown forces that linger where human creation and dark history intersect. And though no one knows what became of those who vanished, one question continues to haunt all who hear the story. When the lights dim, the cameras stop, and the set goes quiet, is it truly empty, or is it merely waiting for the next production, the next victim, the next story?